I want to welcome to our studio here Christopher Tan. He is the CEO of the Foodbank of Southeast Virginia and the Eastern Shore. And this month just happens to be Hunger Action Month, where we're raising awareness and action in the fight against hunger. And Chris, we've done a lot of reporting with you and your team recently because of the growing need, but also changes at the federal level that have impacted you as well. First, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. But first, let's talk about food insecurity in Hampton Roads. Yeah. You all are pivotal in combating that. How have things changed recently? Because I'm hearing there are more people who qualify as being food insecure than years past.
Yeah, so the recent data tells us that food insecurity has grown from 1 in 10 to 1 in 8. So now we're looking at, in our communities in Hampton Roads, 152,000 people are in food insecurity, where that number was closer to 130,000 even just a year ago. The other issues that we have are certainly the availability of food, the availability of recent cuts happening in the federal government and what's going to be coming down the pipeline. And then also, our donations and the ability for us to meet those needs is going to be dramatically impacted.
Chris, when you say, the changes in who qualifies as being food insecure, I don't know if the average person understands the definition of food insecurity.
Yeah.
So when you're explaining it to people, what do you tell them qualifies as food insecure?
Yeah, so it's really an economic indicator of how does the average person in our community, and then those in their income, how well will it pay for their food? So food insecurity can be as little as not knowing really where every meal is going to come from in your life. So you might have enough money for one meal a day and you need 3. It can come from, changes in prices. So food costs are 24% higher than they were 2 years ago. So now what was you were stretching yourself at the grocery store, now it's not meeting the needs. So we know that our food insecurity rate has increased dramatically over the last 2.5 years. The number of people we serve has increased 30% in the last 3 years. And so clearly there's economic indicators that are telling our neighbors that we don't have enough in our resource area.
Because I think when people think food insecurity, they have a certain image of who those people are.
Right.
And I find sometimes it tends to lean towards maybe homeless or houseless, that population of our community, which certainly they fit within that.
Yeah.
But it is not just them. We
not
have
at
this
all.
conversation. It can be the people you work with.
Yeah.
It could be someone who does have a home but can't afford to get food every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Families have to make trade-offs, right? And you have to decide as a family what can you afford this month. I will tell you, when you go to a distribution at our food bank, you will see the working poor. You will see families working 1, 2, 3 jobs to make ends meet. You'll see nursing scrubs. You'll see CNAs. You'll see, unfortunately, at times, members of our military and their families. The reality of it is that the ability for a family to make ends meet, but also for that to go far enough in the grocery bill with a 24% increase in food cost is dramatic. Mm-hmm. We haven't seen the same level of increase in salaries. Typically food banks have been able to use unemployment as a way to judge what the line will look like. And for the first time in a long time, that's not the case. Unemployment is relatively low, but total employment and our ability to meet our needs is what's not happening.
And also, what does it look like right now in terms of the scale of those who are giving and those who need to receive? Have we seen a change there?
Yeah, so I would say, clearly that we've already talked about the need is greater. We are always blessed as a food bank with people who give and people who give generously. But the recent turmoil in the stock market, a lot of our gifts come from people who are making decisions on their investments and things like that. That has kept a lot of our major donors in a kind of holding pattern, waiting to see, what they can give and what they need to give this year. I think, we're hopeful to see, an increase during the holiday season, which is always a great time for food banks to raise money. But we're certainly seeing some restraint, and that's a concern for us, in addition to cuts in government funding and government food that are going to be coming down the pike in October.
Well, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
You talked about the cuts in government funding. We did a series of reports. We've talked to you. We've talked to other food banks. We talked to others who are trying to work in the space of food insecurity. The latest spending bill that was signed into law not long ago, you all raised some concerns about what it projected to do to your efforts.
Sure.
And, just being frank, what you would be able to provide in terms of your resources. How are you all projecting now that it's been signed into law that it will impact you?
So SNAP benefits are being cut across the board in the United States by $200 billion. To think that that won't have a local impact is not possible. The reality of it is that 37% of the people that come to us now don't qualify for SNAP, which means that 60% do. So any increase to the number of people who no longer qualify for SNAP is something that food banks, and particularly our food bank, have to take on as a challenge. We are already truly at capacity. We have delivered more food over the past 3 years than we have delivered in the best 4 years of our food bank combined. So we're talking about last year, we totaled the last 3 years 70 million pounds of food. Well, we do not have the capacity, unfortunately, to meet the need if that SNAP number goes from 37% not qualified to 50, 60, 70%, because we are the last line of defense in that situation. In addition to that, USDA food is being cut pretty significantly as well, and our entitlement remains the same. So we are going to struggle to meet the need if that need becomes as great as we hopefully hope it won't happen, but it probably will.
So just to kind of break down what you're saying there, basically you are anticipating and concerned that the need of those who are going to be coming to you is going to grow so rapidly. At the same time, you were just talking about the USDA cuts.
Yeah.
You're going to have a cut in funding potentially you're concerned about. And so how do you rectify that?
Yeah, so we already know that we're receiving a $300,000 cut in our LFPA funding, which is a local food purchasing agreement funding that helps food banks purchase food from local farmers. So we're bracing for that impact already. We're making adjustments to that. We also know that USDA food is not growing at the rate that the cuts to SNAP will require. So that's going to be a challenge. And we've also seen cancellation in orders that we thought were coming that are no longer coming. So those are, kind of a wave of, if you will, challenges for our food bank. We believe in what we do. We believe in our community, and we know we'll do as best we can to meet those needs. And in addition to that, then we're also going to be receiving cuts in Medicaid. Many people don't think of Medicaid as being a cut to food-based businesses, right? Or food-based nonprofits. But any cut that makes resources for our families challenging is a cut to us.
I was going to ask you about that because we mentioned in our conversations about how Medicaid specifically impacts what you all do at the food bank. Yeah. And it's more so how it impacts the people who typically are coming to utilize, and I don't want to say typically because it makes it seem like it's a certain group of people, but how it impacts the people who are using your services.
For sure. I mean, it's all one safety net in that sense. And the food bank is a part of that. But the reality of it is we also see the same lingering issues like medical costs, the high cost of medical, the high cost of food, the high cost of rent and utilities. All of those things affect the neighbors that we serve because they're going to have to make choices, right? And so if they make choices in their medical health, that may affect their food supply. If they make choices in food, that may not give them enough money for medical. The other thing that we are really focused on recently, which is really important to our food bank, is the health of our food. So we've delivered records amounts of food, but we've delivered more produce than ever before. So we used to deliver 5 years ago, 5 million pounds. Last year it was 8 million pounds. We recognize that the food bank has a role in health. And food is really, honestly, it's the first medicine. What you put in your body helps you to stave off disease. It helps you to, become healthy and more able to work and be educated. And so we have a role in that. But the role of the medical community is going to be deeply impacted by Medicaid cuts.
What about children in our area? I mean, I don't think we've specifically hit on that at this point. Yeah. We've been talking a bit broader, But as we're looking at the cuts that are coming projected through the spending bill, SNAP, Medicaid, you're talking about losing funding from USDA. How are children impacted in the mix?
Yeah. So, 1 in 8 adults is food insecure in our area, which is up from 1 in 10, but 1 in 5 children. So 20% of children.
1 in 5 children?
1 in 5 children. You line up 5 children, 1 is impacted by food insecurity. One of the things, again, that we talked about with the health of our food, and one of, our dreams, I think, as a society is to make America healthy again. But you have to go where people are and are meeting that need. And the reality of it is, in this current structure, where you're born and the income of your family has a great, great impact on your life expectancy, and it shouldn't be. And so our job is to make sure that children have the options of healthy choices, both medically, food, rent and utilities, having a place to stay and live and grow up in neighborhoods where exercise is important and can happen safely. It's all important, and the food bank plays just a small role in that. In many of our neighborhoods, that's 1 in 3 children. Within 10 miles of the studio, there's plenty of neighborhoods where we know that there's food insecurity, and so it's a tough hill to climb.
Are there any other concerns that you all are having? I mean, we know that the spending bill has been signed. We already know that the cuts with USDA are coming. We know that people are going to likely experience a bit more challenge when we talk about Medicaid and SNAP and those things. Is there anything else that you guys are looking at right now, keeping your eyes on, maybe down the line, that you're like, hey, that's the next hurdle we have to face?
I think the next hurdle we're going to have to face is telling the story of food banks moving from food distribution centers to really healthy food access centers, and really creating an opportunity for us to play a pivotal role in food as medicine and food as health. We were working diligently before the Medicaid cuts on trying to figure out a way for Medicaid to help us pay for healthy food for those in need. It's not enough to be quite frank, it's not enough to wait for disease to happen and then try to cure it. We need to prevent it from happening in the first place. And so in our world, that means access to healthcare, access to healthy food, access to safe places to do things. And my biggest concern is, I do think America, thankfully, is more focused on health maybe than we ever have been before. But the disparities that will happen between low income and upper income and high income and middle income will be even greater when that access is focused on as far as making America healthy again. And so right now we know that those in poverty live 10 years less than those that have extreme wealth. And so that gap needs to get smaller if we want to make this place a better place to live.
Do you feel as though food banks, which are such vital resources in any community, do you feel as though you all were listened to enough in the process of, the latest spending bill and where the money would go to? And do you have any hope? Because I know there's been a push lately to see if there's some things that can maybe retroactively try to be changed. Do you have any hope that on the back end people will listen and maybe some things can be adjusted?
Yeah, I think, the politics of it all, I try to stay out of in sense. But I will say I've met with members of Congress after the bill on both sides of the aisle, touring the food bank. All of them, I think, realize that there are imperfections in this bill at worst. And so there are things that they want to work on. There are things that they were listening to us for. There are things that they didn't understand what the impact might be. How much you can change after, I'm not sure. But I do think that the food banks across the Virginia communities and across the nation stand ready to provide as much information on the ground about what we're seeing, which is the reality of it is that many of the people that are coming to our lines are working multiple jobs. They're doing the best they can at a time when food is at an all-time high in cost, when we know that the things that they need to make themselves healthier, if we want to make our lives healthier, are medical, are those things. And they're challenged. And so I feel like our politicians are absolutely listening, and particularly in our district. We've met with many of them, but I think it's also the politics of the day as well. And we need more compromise, and we need more opportunities to really take a step back and learn from one another.
By the way, normally, Chris, I would not wear a tie on this
right.
trip. It's a little bit more laid back, but I'm wearing orange.
We appreciate it.
Because it is Hunger Action Month, and Naya is also spotting her orange.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to just say, I didn't want to put you on the spot, but she so wanted to make sure that she was wearing orange, which is the color for Hunger Action Month.
Yeah.
She went home and changed. She went and got a new
kind.
shirt.
Oh, that's great.
She said, wait, I need to wear my orange.
Oh.
She went home. She put on a new shirt.
Yeah.
And so that we can show our support for the work that you all do.
Thank
and again, we've done so many reports and stories. And you were talking about fresh produce and the role that food banks have and will have in providing that. And I know one of the stories that we've worked on that's very special to both of us is a partnership that you have right now with a farmer in Franklin in Southampton County and a church, Izzy's Field, in which you're literally, through that partnership, growing healthy food.
Yeah, for sure.
Yourself.
You know, you've met Elijah Barnes, who's a fourth-generation farmer who is amazing. He's like a walking storyteller. I love being with him because I never have to go on the news with him because it's always he steals the show for sure. But we're growing, 7.5 acres of corn every year. We harvested this year over 40,000 pounds. And the beauty of that is that corn is grown in one of our most food insecure cities in Franklin, Virginia. It's grown there with love from Elijah and harvested by volunteers, as you know, and then distributed to the community within 2 weeks across our 4,400 square mile footprint. We also then grow peanuts for Elijah. That is his specialty, and they're sold by Hubbard's Peanuts, and part of the proceeds go to the food bank. It's a really, amazing way to get food into our food bank. That's, obviously the primary reason. But the other way that what it does is it provides education to kids and to neighbors and to those people that want to get involved. That this is where your food comes from. It's the importance of growing food, understanding, what we're doing. We're going to grow broccoli and collards in the fall and in the winter. And so it's a great partnership and one that we're really proud of and one that you've covered greatly for us and brought a lot of attention to.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite stories that I've been able to work a part of, and we just saw each other last week. I was on a panel with Elijah and another farmer here within the area talking about their stories and their efforts, and you were speaking right after that. And if people see this, Chris, and they want to help, right, how could they go about doing that? You mentioned volunteers. Are there, I'm sure they could donate as well, and I'll let you give the information for that, but are there certain foods, are there certain things that you all could really use maybe from the public or companies who might want to invest in helping against food insecurity in Hampton Roads?
At the food bank, we talk a lot about really our business model is really quite simple. It's just neighbors helping neighbors because that's what neighbors do. And, whether you're a, 13 News anchor who can bring attention to our work, whether you're a neighbor who is a farmer who can lend his expertise in helping you grow food, it really is this kind of, microcosm of just people helping. So the first thing we would tell people that want to be potential donors is, think about what it is that you'd like to give to us. Your time and resources are important to us. We get 7,000 volunteers a year. You can go to foodbankonline.org and sign up anytime. And we have volunteer opportunities every single day in the community, at our warehouse, places like that. If, your time is limited, but your resources are great and you want to donate, food or funds, we would love to have your resources and we will do our best with them. We will 95 cents of every dollar we spend goes directly to those people in need. If you were willing to give us $10, we can turn that into $60 worth of groceries. And then finally, obviously, food is a necessity, and food banks started by collecting food and donating food. So if that's what you would like to donate, we would love to have it. Again, we can turn your dollar into more valuable food, but we also recognize that for particular like kids, it's a good way to get young people involved in our work. Ask them to do a neighborhood drive and ask people to clean out their pantries. Things that you're probably never going to eat but could be eaten by somebody in need. So there's just a number of ways, and I think the best way to do it is to look at what it is that you think you can give to us, and we would love to have that.
Well, Christopher Tan, President and CEO of the Food Bank of Southeastern Virginia and the Eastern Shore. Naya, you've been quiet over there. And listen, let me tell you something. Naya can ask you some questions now. So, Naya, did you have anything that you wanted to ask Chris or to kind of comment when it comes to this conversation?
I don't have anything. I think y'all hit all the topics on the head.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for going and changing. We appreciate it. That's very impactful for sure.
I want to be a part of the cause.
That's right. We need it for sure. Thank you.
Every bit counts. Well, Chris, thanks so much for what you do and for coming on as well and talking about this very important conversation that's not going to go away. And we'll definitely, be following up as we see the potential effects that you're saying could be coming down and not that long from now.
Well, thank you for covering this, and thank you for all. You've been a great friend to the food bank, so we really appreciate it for sure.
Well, you guys have done great work, so I appreciate it, Chris. All right.